this is all about healing, but when you think about your healing journey, you don't just go from unhealed to healed.
Let's talk about our stress responses.
Yeah. I'm happy that you brought that up, actually, because as I was driving here today, and like, I feel stressed in my body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the only one, but I feel stressed.
I can feel the squeezing in my chest. Like,
yeah, I have some nerves. I don't know if it's the chaos with my son back in school, or with the podcast,
mm-hmm.
or I don't know, but it's definitely there. My stress is definitely there. And so I know you and I have talked a lot about pausing and feeling what's inside of our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought today, not just for you and I, but for our listeners, whether you're driving, whether you're at home, I think that we should just pause for a second and do a quick breathing exercise.
Okay.
So we're going to start with inhaling for 4 seconds. We're going to hold it for 7 and exhale for 8. Let's do that together.
Sounds great.
Inhale for 4. Hold for 7. And exhale for 8. Let's do it one more time.
How do you feel now?
Shake it out a little bit. I feel a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I love that exercise. I even do it after my workouts.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps bring your heart rate back down, gets you level again. I do feel a little bit better. Of course, I'd probably have to do that for the next half hour to really get completely level again. But that's a really good exercise too for our listeners if they're ever in a trauma response. And it's funny that we talk about that because I don't know what my trauma responses are. I know you do. I think people pleasing is one of my trauma responses that I've been trying to get away from, but I don't even know what all of them are to be able to say, okay, yes, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
What are yours?
For sure. People pleasing, perfectionism, hustle culture.
Yes.
I feel like it's only shown to my husband, but in my fight response, with him occasionally, I don't usually put up that wall with anyone else, but with him, he gets the fight.
Yeah. My husband does too.
Scrolling is a stress response.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
It is. And I think it's interesting that you say, I don't know which one mine is.
Add an S to that. I know that there's many.
But also it's not quite how it works. Like we don't just sit in fight or flight, and we don't just sit in freeze. It is actually linear.
Interesting.
Yeah. I feel like, can I draw it out?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm a visual learner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes so much more sense with an analogy and beautiful pictures.
Okay, good. All right, let's do that. Awesome, Britt. All right, so what do you got for us?
Okay, so I'm at the whiteboard, and if you're driving, just listen as I describe it. As I draw it out, it's actually going to help me describe it more. But if you are interested, go ahead and check out our YouTube page where you can see the visual of what we call the traffic light of trauma responses. And we think of the 4 responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Karah, have you heard of fawn?
I just actually heard about it recently. I didn't dive too deep into it, but I'm aware of the fawn response.
Okay, so that is more the people pleasing, always saying yes type of response. First one is freeze. So we have the freeze response in our nervous system, which is formulated first before any other parts of our nervous system are created. The freeze response, that is where you are going to have difficulty getting out of bed. You are going to feel immobilized and stuck. So if you can relate to ever feeling stuck in your life and you don't know what to do, maybe you're like looking at your kitchen that's an absolute disaster and you just stand and stare at it and you're like, I can't do this. That is freeze. Mine is often, not wanting to get up in the morning and get out of bed right away. Like that is your freeze response. And then the next one that we have, most people know of as fight flight.
Oh, they're separate.
They're separate.
Interesting. But they're both in the yellow, or in this case, orange.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we don't have a yellow marker. So these are both in the yellow. Fight and flight really go together. And this might be fight. You really think of like arguing with anyone, and maybe your kids, your husband, whatever.
Coworkers.
Yeah.
Boss.
Flight is feeling that need to run or escape. And so in modern times, we don't have a lot of people who are just running away from their lives. And so this is more like escapism. So scrolling on your phone, staying busy is this response. Always having to improve and go to the next thing and the next thing. That is the flight response.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, for myself, I'm constantly doing something right, whether it's school, work, running my son around to different activities, working on the businesses, any type of business that I've got going on. But when you also talk about flight, would you say that, and I could be completely wrong here, but would you say that dissociation is also kind of a flight response, or no? Are we then condensing the two together that shouldn't be there?
That's a great question. Dissociation is actually in freeze.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you have completely dissociated from everything, that you no longer have feelings or emotions tied to it. You are frozen in that.
Okay. If I'm in a fight with my husband and I'm feeling scared or unsafe in that type of environment because of the conversation we're having, whether, for me, a lot of our conversations can stem around the sexual abuse side of my history. And so sometimes in my body, I don't feel very safe in that aspect. If I'm just walking away from him, is that more of a flight response? Because I'm saying, no, I don't feel like having this conversation right now. Maybe even though he's not attacking me, because that's not what he does, he's very supportive, but maybe because of certain words he's saying, I feel attacked. Is that a flight response?
That is a flight response. It might not be an unhealthy response in that moment either. Like the beauty of this, these are all from your nervous system, and the point of your nervous system is to keep you safe. The problem with trauma survivors is that they are so in the need for the safety that it actually ends up, how do I say this? Taking over everything, so that like trauma survivors may never feel safe. And so they're stuck in these responses because their body itself does not feel safe. Even though the threat may no longer be lurking around, the body feels unsafe. And so it can be living in these things. There's something called functional freeze, where somebody is doing the day-to-day exercises, going to work, parenting, running around, all of the things, but they're doing it maybe with like a drug addiction or alcoholism. So that would also be like, you're kind of really frozen and stuck in those things. And they're not even aware that they're in their freeze response, because this is just the life that they have created, but they are so far away from understanding what's happening in their body that they can't feel anything because they numbed themselves so much. That is like functional freeze. They can carry on the day to day, but they're not feeling anything.
A lot of our listeners probably know someone or are that person who are either that freeze, fight, or flight. You talk about that person being unaware and they're living in that, maybe that alcoholism. How do you think a spouse who is aware of it, right? They're going through their healing. How do you think a spouse can help that person kind of come out of that freeze? And if you don't know, we can always come back to it, because I know that that's a really hard question, but I think it's one that maybe our listeners might need help with.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it is such a complex question, I do think we need to have another conversation or another episode on that specifically, because you don't fall into one category of freeze, fight, or flight. It's actually linear. And there's a third one, which I'm not sure if you are aware of.
What's the third one, Brittany?
This is your ventral vagal response.
Does green mean good?
Green means good.
I love that.
And your ventral vagal response is when you feel calm, connected, confident, curious, right? You don't jump to judgment. This is your safe place. Okay, this is where we essentially want to be. And before polyvagal theory came out, they knew of these two things, freeze, fight, and flight, as the response systems, like they learned from animals, right? Because we are mammals. What they didn't know is that it works in a spotlight trajectory. Okay? So it is fluid. And it is always going up and down. You cannot go from red to green.
Okay.
So when you think of like helping, your spouse or someone who's stuck in freeze, you can't get them to their green ventral vagal state without going through fight flight first.
Okay.
And you can't go to it very quickly. Otherwise, their body will think danger, danger.
And put them back into freeze.
And put them back into freeze.
Okay. And that's very much, this is all about healing. But when you think about your healing journey, you don't just go from unhealed to healed.
Correct.
It is a roller coaster. So in this instance, though, even on the healing journey, could you go from ventral vagal back up to freeze and then through the process again? That happens multiple times through our lives, right? Or
yes.
Do a lot of people live in ventral vagal or fight or flight or freeze and never go back to the others?
No, because we need these to survive.
Okay.
Right? So this is our automatic nervous system where we actually need freeze, fight, flight in the case that there was an actual traumatic event like a house fire.
Okay.
Right? What do I do at this moment? I need to turn my thinking brain off. And this is exactly what happens. You turn your thinking brain off and your automaticity of your body and survival instincts kicks in and takes over. You don't want that to stop.
So if you lived in your ventral vagal, that would never happen?
No.
Okay.
You would never be able to do these things. However, even though it is a flow, it can happen in an instant. So it might look like you went from your ventral vagal safety space to freeze. It looks like you skipped fight flight, but you didn't. It just happened so fast that you didn't recognize what was happening in those moments.
Gotcha.
And so we don't want to lose these things. They protect us. Like our brains are incredible things because we need these to survive. The problem is we don't have the same threats that we did in the past, right?
We're not cavemen anymore.
We're not cavemen anymore. So our threats now are like our screaming children, right? That are activating our nervous system, our boss that's yelling at us, finances that aren't paid for. Like those are our modern day stressors, but they're putting us into, oh my gosh, my house is on fire and how am I going to escape?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't want to lose them. We just want to notice them and know how to shift them. So if the, response is a modern day threat, we'll call it, quote unquote threat, we can recognize we are safe. Everything around me is safe right now, because you're also not going to solve any problems in your freeze, fight, or flight.
Correct.
Right? You need to be in your ventral vagal. We call it turning online. You want your brain to be back online so you can think logically.
Okay.
And not emotionally. What I find very interesting is that the freeze, like I said, is the first thing that is developed in your body. The second thing is your fight-flight response. Your ventral vagal is not developed. It is taught.
Wow.
But
who teaches you these things? Your parents?
Yeah.
And then if you have parents who don't have their own ventral vagal, then they can never teach you that either. So you grow up not thinking that there is a safe space.
Correct.
Wow.
And you grow up thinking that your freeze, fight, flight is completely normal, and that's just who you are.
Yeah.
Because you don't know that there's another option.
Interesting. So I know that we're definitely going to get into some of these a little bit more. Maybe we'll even spend some time just talking about freeze one episode and then the others another episode. What's some advice that we can leave our audience today if maybe they're stuck in one of these? I know the breathing exercise that we did a little bit earlier is something that can help them with freeze, fight, or flight. But do you have another piece of advice that you can leave our audience if they are stuck in one of these?
Yeah, I would say when we're stuck in freeze or even fight flight, think about those are two very different things. One, you are like immobilized, and the other one, you are over mobilized, right? You're either running or you're fighting. If you can take the smallest step, and I mean small so that we don't overwhelm our nervous system, in the opposite direction.
Okay.
So if you're in the freeze, what can I do to start moving? A walk might be perfect for some people, but it might be too much for someone else. So you might just take a warm bath, because then you can start to feel the water around you. You're moving and you're calming a little bit. And then the same with fight flight. That one might be a bath also for the opposite reasons. And calming music helps with this. When I'm in my freeze, an upbeat playlist all the way. Like that is the one that gets me going. And I am like singing and rocking out and all of these things. And then I do want to bring up, we don't have to talk about it in detail. This could be another episode, but in your ventral vagal, this is because your vagus nerve runs through your nervous system. And there are ways to start toning this. And as you start toning this, it will start to become more automatic, because the reason these are taking over is because they're automatic. They are there and your body has done them for so long. And so it automatically goes to that. This one is not automatic, and we have to train our brains to start taking the ventral vagal safe route over the other fight, flight, freeze routes.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for showing us. It's something that I've never seen this before. So I think that's really, really important to show our audience too.
Well, make sure we put some resources in the show notes of this episode, because really the first start of understanding your nervous system and your healing process is to note, what does freeze look like in modern times? And am I in that state? And so sometimes you might not even know, what does freeze look like, right? So we can compile a list for you. And then as we go on through future episodes, we will see how do we start getting out of that freeze.
Yeah, and I definitely think it would be really important for our listeners to, if you have any questions about this, specifically for yourself, reach out to us in the comments, or we'll even make sure that we drop our email so that you can reach out to us anonymously. Or if you want to share any stories with us, that would be really important for you to do that too.
Absolutely. And if you love what you're listening, then go ahead and subscribe and leave a review.
Awesome. We'll see you next week. Let's spread some sunshine. Bye, everyone.